Hello and welcome to VFX Talks, a show about development and leadership in the VFX industry. My name is Alfred Lindahl, and in this episode I will talk a bit about leadership and particularly about dealing with inappropriate behavior or poor performance and having those difficult conversations that can come with that. So let's say someone on your team is treating someone else inappropriately, or someone is getting all emotional, pushing back maybe too fiercely on some feedback, or someone is slacking off, just not delivering what you expect of them. Then what do you do? If you're a lead or supervisor, or even just as a teammate. And if you're anything like me, introverted, maybe a bit too agreeable, so I just want to be friends with everyone, then you might find these situations tough to deal with. So today I'm going to share an episode from my career where I was the one misbehaving and what I later learned from that situation. And hopefully you can learn something as well. So here we go. I was around 20 years old in my first job in VFX at Ghost VFX in Copenhagen. And I was some kind of junior technical animator. And on one project, we got some really last minute changes for the animation of a helicopter, if I remember correctly. And I was supposed to fix something and have a new version out really quickly so they could put that in the edit and send it to the client for approval or whatever it was. And it was an easy fix, but I had what felt like a team of producers and supervisors who stood behind my back and watched me do those changes. So I, of course, got really stressed out by that. And I think I made some stupid mistake, saved it in the wrong place or whatever it was. And they got more stressed out and maybe made a comment about that. And I got even more stressed out, like exponentially more stressed out, because they were some of the more senior people in the company. One of them was even my boss. So even though it was just about some commercial, at that moment, it felt like my life depended on it. And I could have turned around and said, I'm sorry, guys. It's really hard to focus with everyone standing behind me, watching me. So just give me 5 minutes and I'll have a new version out. But instead, I did what any kid without communication skills might have done. So I started to whine and complain about how it wasn't fair, that they couldn't come with this feedback this late, and how it was maybe a stupid change anyways. So I acted like a butthurt brat, basically. Very unproductive, not the proudest moment of my career. But looking back at it today, some 15 years later, I don't really blame myself. I was just a kid, and the situation they put me in wasn't really fair, to be honest. But that's not really the point of telling this story. The point is what my boss did next. So as soon as I delivered the new version, he took me aside, was like, Alfred, you have a few minutes? And I was, of course, mortified because I knew I had acted unprofessionally and was about to get told off in some harsh way, probably. So he brought me into his office, closed the door, and I waited for that bashing to come, but it never came. And he just calmly explained that, okay, this kind of behavior is unacceptable. And then he let me explain my version of what had happened, and so how the pressure from all those senior people pushed me over the edge, and maybe I had worked late the night before, or I don't know. But at least I got a chance to apologize, and that was the end of it, basically. And I remember being so grateful for what he did, and I even thanked him afterwards, because I knew I had behaved inappropriately, and if my boss didn't do anything about it, I wouldn't have had the balls to go to him and apologize myself. So then I would probably have worried about his impression of me and how it would affect our relationship in the future, maybe affect my salary review or even my future at the company. I know it's not that dramatic, but when you're 20 in your first job, at least that was what I was thinking. So in doing this, like, he basically just cleared the air and allowed me to move forward without having all that baggage and those thoughts running amok in my head. So he took my bad behavior as an opportunity to strengthen our relationship and also to help me develop and grow. And I for sure didn't want to disappoint him again after that. So I had to do some introspection and think about, okay, how can I deal with these situations in the future? But it took me many years to realize how skillfully he acted and how the outcome could have been very different if he had let me get away with that bad behavior. And what he did was actually really simple, but definitely not easy. And I know from having failed to do the same later in my career, and also from seeing really good leaders fail to deal with these kinds of situations in varying degrees. So what he did was he acted quickly. He kept his emotions at least somewhat in check, and he was clear to the point. And then he listened to what I had to say, and that was it. And my respect for my boss really increased a lot in that situation. And I think his faith in me got restored, at least somewhat, I hope. And I didn't have to worry too much about how this would affect my future at the company, because it felt like we settled it. Okay, let's leave this, move on. So personally, I find it really hard to deal with these kinds of situations, to deal with inappropriate behavior or poor performance. I'm worried that I will hurt someone's feelings or damage relationships or make things even worse. But this episode really taught me that many times the nicest thing you can do as a leader is to do that uncomfortable thing, to have that difficult conversation and to deal with it right away. So let me say that again. Many times the nicest thing you can do as a leader is to do that uncomfortable thing and to have that uncomfortable conversation and to deal with it right away. But, and this is a big but, you really have to be willing to listen to the other person. If you bring someone in and just bash them and say that this is not okay, what the fuck, straighten up, then you won't build any relationships, or you won't make it better. You're probably gonna make it worse for next time. But if you're willing to really listen, a situation like this is like the perfect opportunity to strengthen your relationship and have a better working relationship in the future. And the good thing is you don't really have to tell anyone off to begin with. Just the action of bringing someone aside, asking them, oh, do you have a few minutes? Can you come into my office, or just move into a meeting room or whatever? That is most likely enough to have them thinking, and just like I did, like, oh shit, yeah, I know I behaved inappropriately. Now I'm gonna get bashed. So you don't really have to bash them. They're probably gonna feel that themselves anyway. So you can just ask, how are you doing? What just happened out there? And then listen to what they have to say and be compassionate. And yeah, you never know what someone might be going through outside of work or inside their own heads, like performance anxiety or relationship problems or depression or what have you. I've tried them all. So that person most likely know he or she did something wrong. And if it's not the psychopath you're dealing with, they probably feel ashamed, just as a 20-year-old me did. And feeling ashamed and worried about what other might think of you, that's definitely not going to make it easier to perform. It's not going to make the performance anxiety go away or raise your self-esteem. And so it's pretty easy to get stuck in a negative spiral if no one intervenes. So if this is not the first time this person is misbehaving or underperforming, or if you have noticed a negative trend in their mood or behavior over time, then you really have to do something for their own sake, basically. For being a leader is about taking care of your team, looking after your team. And I find acting in the moment like this, just like my boss did, to be so much more effective and humane than to wait for the next performance review or to wait for the next good opportunity that probably will never come. And this brings me to another really important thing for leaders to think about, and that is how to escalate interventions like these. So you really have to start small. When someone is behaving in a bad way or if someone is underperforming, you can't just do a full-scale performance review and gather tons of feedback and sit them down with HR and what have you and say that this is not okay, make sure it never happens again. You have to start small, because they will ask, if you do that, they will ask, but why didn't anyone tell me that this was a problem? Then I could have fixed it 2 years ago. So if you're a leader or a coworker and you feel that you have the guts to do something like this, it's so much more humane, and it's like the kind thing to do is to bring someone aside early and say, okay, what you're doing out there, maybe it's not the best thing. Remember that this is a junior, you shouldn't be so hard on him, or whatever it might be. And if you start with that, and then you can see if the behavior improves, or if it doesn't, then it might be time to step it up, and you can talk to your boss or to HR and ask for advice. And maybe then it might be time to talk to the person again, or maybe gather some feedback and see, is this something that has been going on for a long time? And then you can scale up the intervention. But you have to start with that small thing. You have to start with just being a human, being a friend, asking, what's going on? How are you doing? Is there anything you need to get off your chest, or is there anything we can do differently? So think about that especially as maybe a new leader, it might be hard to take these difficult conversations. They're usually not that difficult if you do it in this compassionate way, but it might be hard to initiate, like take someone aside. But if you frame it that it's probably the nicest thing you can do to this person is to take them aside and just talk. If you don't do anything, that can actually be mean, because that person might be stuck in a loop that you could have helped them break. But if you don't do it, you're actually holding them back from being happy and perform well. So I would say that's my big takeaway from this incident, that the nicest thing you can do as a leader is often to do that uncomfortable thing and to deal with it right away. You don't have to plan. You don't have to write down what you're going to say. Just ask how they're doing. And that's all I had for today. So I hope you enjoyed this rant, and let me know if this was something you liked, if you learned something from it. And also, I really hope you can try this, because it doesn't have to be such a big thing. And if you just start practicing and being a bit more aware, acting in the moment, taking a big breath yourself and like calm your emotions, then it's going to be fine. And you're going to be a super good leader and appreciated by your team. So good luck out there. Talk to you soon.